My dear children of P4, my name is Monica John once again. In this session, we shall be looking at blocks in the food path and many more things that we shall discover. But for the betterment of good communication with you, allow me to remove my mask because I know where you are seated, you are putting on a mask. Therefore, as I remove, don't say that the teacher has removed, so let me also remove. Continue sanitizing, keep yourself clean, and avoid touching the eyes if you are not sure of their cleanliness. Even the nose and the mouth. Therefore, sit very well and we go to the lesson of today. So last time when we met, we learned and we looked at some things, and I think you know them. But I remember I left you with my activity that you wrote very well, I believe. There is no crossing. You know I don't like crossed work. I need neat work. Now, help me, and we move together and we go through together and we see what I left you with. So our first question was, what is harvesting? And my answer is, harvesting is the removal of ready crops from the garden. Remember I told you these crops they have to be ready before you harvest them. Mention too that the ways people harvest crops from their gardens. And the answer is my answers. We discussed many things, many methods of harvesting crops. But here I have cutting, I have hand picking and uprooting. If you wrote other answers that we discussed still, the answer will be correct. Then we also looked at, they said, give one reason why people store surplus food. What is surplus food? The food that you harvest and you retain. You like when you harvest 60 bags of maize, you can't prepare all of them in a day. So what you do, you cook little and then you keep the rest. That the rest of the food you have not prepared and you have just kept is called surplus. So why do people store surplus food? We discussed many answers, discussed many points, but here one of them is for future use. You can add others like to prevent wastage and others. Another one, why is a granary made with rat guards? A granary is made with rat guards to prevent rats from entering it or entering the granary. Then we have state the reason why granaries are raised above the ground. Why are granaries raised above the ground? You don't put them on the ground, but you a little bit raise it up. What's the answer? To prevent dampness or to prevent flowing water from entering it. You know, when the flowing water, when it rains and flowing water enters the granary, some seeds are going to germinate, others are going to rot, others will be eaten by crawling animals. So, some animals that crawl, insects and whatever. So they will destroy them. Therefore, you need to raise a granary the way we discussed last time. And our last question here is, why should crops that need storage to be dried? Why do we dry those crops that need to be stored? And the answer is to prevent them from rotting. So let's go to today's lesson and we see And with today's lesson, we shall be looking at the blocks in the food path and then the stages of town food path. And what do I expect you from this lesson? One, you'll be able to mention the stages of town food path. Remember, we have been looking at village food path and we have put it down. We saw where people are preparing food and eating in the village food path. Then here we shall look at the stages. Another thing that I expect from you is you will be able to explain the term blocks in the food path. Blocks in the food path. Two, you will state the blocks in the food path. Another one, you will identify the ways of controlling some blocks in the food path. Now, let's move on and we see that the stages of town food path. One, town food path, we said these are different stages of food production in urban areas. Different stages of food production in urban areas. Now, what are those stages? Can you think about the stages of food path? Try to touch your head, close your eyes and think about the stages. What are those stages that you think are in town food path? Some people live in urban areas, they live in towns. Some people live in villages, but they have a town food path. Like some people who live in trading centers of Bushenyi, Manafa, Mbale. There are some trading centers that you can see that these people are in villages, but they have a town food path. What are those stages? One, we have in towns, where do people get food? They get food from markets. They get from supermarkets. They get from different places. Some people like cafe javas. Others can go in different places, but they get food. So the first stage is buying food. The second one is transportation or taking food home. Taking food home. They take the food home. Then after reaching home, you don't just sit and look at it. They do what we call preparing the food. You can see how people are preparing food. Then we look at the last stage in the food path is eating the food. These are simply the stages of town food path. These are the stages of town food path. And I think in our homes, this is what takes place. Like yesterday, I saw mommy passing by the market and bought some food, took it home, prepared, and you enjoyed. Didn't you? Now, if you enjoyed, let's continue and we look at blocks in the food path. Blocks in the food path. When I talk about blocks in the food path, I'm not meaning the blocks that are used for constructing storage buildings, blocks that are used for constructing our wall fences, but we are commonly looking at the problems that affect different stages in our food path. Now, what do you think the term blocks in the food path mean? What are they? Because I have told you that they are not blocks that are used for road blocks. They are not road blocks. But what do they mean? Compare your answer with mine. Now, blocks are problems that affect the food path. Blocks are the problems that affect the food production. Can you define it with me? What are blocks in the food path? Blocks are problems that affect the food production. I think you can see one problem here. You can look at this problem which is taking place. A monkey is eating a maize. It is eating someone who's maize. That's a block. So they are just problems that affect the food production. So let's look at the examples of food of blocks in the food path. One of them is pests and diseases. Pests and diseases. Pests and diseases affect the food production. How do pests affect the food production? Pests destroy people's crops. Pests destroy people's crops. And the two, diseases lower the crop yield. If crops have been affected by diseases, they will not produce what is required of the crops. Like you can see apples have been eaten. Can you eat those apples that have been eaten by pests, or can you eat affected crops that have been affected by diseases? Remember, when they affect diseases, they eat up the roots, they eat up the leaves. The pests are going to destroy the fruits. They will make them. When you cut a diseased fruit, you'll find that it is dark in color, meaning that it will not be good to eat. Another block is poor roads. Poor roads. Like people who carry out town food path. Sometimes they buy food from villages, then they bring transport to towns. You can see these people struggling to push a vehicle. This is a bad thing in the food production. Sometimes a lorry carrying bananas from Masaka, from Kabale, Kasese, from Bushenyi, bringing to Kampala. If the roads are not good, the food will delay to reach its destination. Let's look at another block. We have floods or too much rainfall. How does too much rainfall affect food production? Now, if there is too much rainfall, it will destroy the whole garden. Or you will find when the crops have been flooded and you can't enter the garden to dig, you can't weed, and some of those crops are going to, the roots are going to rot because there is too much water in the soil. Therefore, too much rainfall destroys crops. That's how it affects the food production or food path. Let's look at another one. We have strong wind. We have strong wind. We have strong wind. When there is strong wind, when there is strong wind comes and blows all the crops, and the crops are going to be destroyed. They will be broken. They will fall on the ground and they will decay from there. So heavy rainfall destroy crops. Let's look at another one. Drought. Now, drought is a period of sunshine, of too much sunshine with little or no rainfall. With little or no rainfall. How does drought affect the food production or food path? Drought leads to drying of crops in the garden. The crops are going to dry if there is too much sunshine, because there is no water in the soil, they will dry. So they will be destroyed. Are we together? So, in this session, I like my children, and I always want you to follow what I teach. I've left you with an activity that you are going to be doing, and after that, I will come back and we go through together. Thank you.